In 1987, Apple released a video that almost no one believed. It showed a thin, touch-controlled tablet a full 23 years before the first iPad. It could make video calls, display interactive articles, analyze data, manage your life, and answer questions using a built-in AI assistant. It was called the Knowledge Navigator, and when people saw it, they laughed. It looked impossible, too futuristic, too ambitious, too far ahead. But here's the unsettling truth. Almost everything in that video came true, just not when Apple expected. This is the story of the device that predicted the future, and the company that wasn't ready to build it. Welcome to Missed Futures, the series where we explore the inventions that arrived too early and the visionaries who paid the price for imagining tomorrow long before anyone else could see it. Because sometimes the future doesn't start with hardware. Sometimes it starts with a dream. And in 1987, Apple dreamed bigger than the world was ready for. It begins during one of the darkest times in Apple's history. Sales were falling. The Macintosh wasn't the miracle the company hoped for. And Steve Jobs, the man who symbolized Apple's soul, had been fired 2 years earlier. Inside the company, engineers and executives felt lost. So Apple did something strange. They created a series of futuristic concept videos called the Knowledge Navigator films. They weren't meant to sell a product. They were meant to answer a question. What should Apple become? What they produced was astonishing. In the video, a professor walks into his home office. On his desk, a thin, flat, book-sized device with a glowing screen. He touches it, and an AI assistant appears, speaking naturally. Not a robotic voice, a friendly one. It calls him by name. It understands context. It pulls up data from the web. It organizes his calendar. It even interprets charts and models on the fly. Then the professor says, "Call my colleague." The tablet opens a video call instantly. No cables, no keyboard, no mouse, just touch and intelligence. In 1987, this made no sense. The internet barely existed. There were no touchscreens in homes, no handheld computers, no digital assistants, and certainly no video calls on portable screens. To the average viewer, it looked like fantasy. To Apple, it looked like destiny. The only thing missing from the Knowledge Navigator was reality. What makes this story remarkable isn't what Apple predicted, it's how accurate they were. The tablet in the video is almost the exact size of an iPad. The interface looks eerily like iOS. The assistant behaves like an early version of SIRI. The video call resembles FaceTime down to the camera placement. Even the professor's gestures, swiping, tapping, pinching, look exactly like the gestures Steve Jobs would demo in 2010. It was as if Apple had filmed the future and then misplaced the instructions for how to get there. Apple saw the iPad decades early, but seeing tomorrow means nothing if you can't survive today. Internally, the video became a source of tension. Some Apple engineers found it inspiring. Others found it painful. The company simply didn't have the technology to build it. Not even close. Batteries were too weak. Screens were too bulky. Processors were too slow. Networking was non-existent. Touch interfaces were primitive. AI assistants were science fiction. The Knowledge Navigator showed the destination, but Apple didn't have the map. The company drifted, projects failed, money burned, executives panicked. And in 1997, 10 years after the video, Apple was weeks away from bankruptcy. Then Steve Jobs returned.
When he saw the Knowledge Navigator films, his reaction was immediate. He hated them. Not because they were unrealistic, but because they reminded him of what Apple had not accomplished. Jobs believed in focusing on what was possible today, not dreaming about the far future. He famously said, "Real artists ship." To him, the Knowledge Navigator was a wound, a vision the company wasn't capable of building yet. So he buried it. Hard. Apple stopped talking about the future. They focused on the now, and they fought for survival. But here's the twist. The iMac led to the iPod. The iPod led to the iPhone. And the iPhone became the foundation of the iPad. The Knowledge Navigator hadn't been erased. It had been delayed. Apple didn't abandon the dream. They just had to live long enough to build it. In 2010, Steve Jobs walked on stage holding a thin, flat tablet. White bezel, no keyboard, no mouse, just touch. The world gasped, but people inside Apple remembered. The device in Jobs' hands didn't just resemble the Knowledge Navigator, it was the Knowledge Navigator. Finally real, finally possible, finally ready. The future had arrived, only 23 years late. But the story goes deeper. Apple's 1987 concept predicted not just devices, but how humans would use them. Video calls would become normal. Digital articles would replace newspapers. Online collaboration would become everyday life. Personal assistants would help with schedules and information. Touchscreens would replace physical buttons. Portable computers would become central to education. Information would be fluid, instant, alive. Every prediction came true, just not in Apple's darkest era, but in its brightest. The Knowledge Navigator wasn't a prophecy. It was a blueprint waiting for the right decade. And yet, there's an eerie irony. Today, the iPad is everywhere, but the assistant inside it still isn't as capable as the one Apple imagined in 1987. The Knowledge Navigator could analyze documents, connect ideas, understand complex questions, and respond like a human colleague. SIRI can't do that. In a strange way, the iPad arrived, but the brain inside it hasn't. The future Apple predicted still hasn't fully shown up. So what if Apple had built the iPad in the 1990s? What if battery tech and computing power had evolved faster? What if the internet had matured earlier? Would Apple have dominated the digital revolution sooner? Would tablets have replaced laptops decades earlier? Would AI assistants have become normal before the millennium? What if the biggest barrier to progress isn't imagination, but timing? Apple's 1987 Knowledge Navigator teaches us something uncomfortable. The future often exists long before we're ready to build it. Ideas arrive fully formed. Reality arrives slowly. A vision without timing becomes a prophecy, and a prophecy can spend decades trapped in a drawer. We think technology shapes the world, but sometimes it's the world that decides when technology is allowed to matter. For a brief moment in 1987, Apple showed us the next century. A universe of tablets, assistants, video calls, and digital knowledge that felt impossible. The world laughed, and then quietly, relentlessly, it came true. This was Missed Futures, the series where we explored the ideas that came too soon and the people brave enough to imagine them. If you believe the future doesn't wait, subscribe and join us for the next episode of Missed Futures.